Here's what's coming up on Network Africa. South Africa rescues several victims, including children, in a major anti-trafficking operation. The United Nations says death toll from floods in Somalia rises to 110 plus. At least 20 wounded Gazans received in Tunisia for treatment. Hello and welcome to the program today. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in South Africa, where police have rescued 33 victims of suspected human trafficking after they were found cramped together in a room in Benoni, Gauteng province. The police say in a statement that one suspect has been arrested in relation to the Sunday evening incident. It said KwaZulu-Natal detectives were investigating a trafficking syndicate after a foreign national was kidnapped in Springfield Park, Durban, last week. The ages of the victims are yet to be confirmed, as the suspect is expected to appear in court. Meanwhile, authorities have also intercepted dozens of buses transporting 443 children, all under the age of 8, into the country from neighboring Zimbabwe. Now, this follows a sting operation conducted by the South African Border Management Authority and the police at the Beitbridge border post. BMA Commissioner Michael Masiapato said over 40 buses conveying the children were stopped at the north gate of the busy border post with Zimbabwe before they entered South Africa. Although the children had passports, they were traveling without parents, guardians, and permission letters as regulations require.
I also want to touch on what happened just last night. A sting operation has been conducted by the border guards, the Home Affairs Anti-Corruption team, as well as members of the SAPS at the Beitbridge border post just this night. They were able to stop and search about 42 buses trying to enter the Republic, and out of that we found 443 children under the age of 8 that were in those buses without any parent or any guardian. Fairly, they were being trafficked into South Africa. We were able to take them out of those buses. We were then able to engage with the Zimbabwean officials, and we handed them back to Zimbabwe for processing back into the country.
Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Semosa, joins us now for more updates. Hello, Innocent. We understand from what we've just listened to, there were 2 trafficking operations conducted by authorities over the weekend. Give us more details about both of them.
Well, greetings to you, Layo. It's good to be in your company, and greetings to our viewers around the world. I guess perhaps we should begin by, big ups to the border management authorities for what they've done, Layo, given the fact that there's been a lot of complaints, about South Africa's borders. Civil society groups, politicians, and of course, ordinary South Africans have been complaining that South Africa's borders are essentially porous. I guess this is a step in the right direction. It does, in a way, put some level of confidence to South Africa's borders. But of course, the incident that we're talking about, Layo, it took place on Saturday night. That's where they intercepted. There was a sting operation, as you would know, that leading to this particular festive season would really have so much of these sting operations into making sure that people are safe and people have the right documentation. But also speaking about the porous borders, there's been a lot of complaints about the issues around the fact that people would give some corrupt officials money so they come to the country without papers. So that is one of the long-standing issue that has been, if for want of a better term, a burden to this particular border management operation. But of course, this one took place on Saturday. The kids were without a guardian or parents, as you rightly alluded. But we understand right now that the kids were handed over to the Zimbabwean authority as it stands. That information we got from the Border Management Authority, Layo.
Right, now, talking about the first story that we spoke about, that's the 33 rescued victims of suspected human trafficking. What more can you tell us about that story? They were found, cramped together in a room in the Gauteng province.
Yeah, 100%. Apparently, they were found. I think the number is 42 buses. Apparently, so they had this 443 kids who were cramped up in these buses. I guess it was a little bit suspicious, given the fact that, well, they say that they had documentation, but the fact that they were just alone, that posed a lot of questions from who is actually taking care of these kids, and it was clear that they've been trafficked, Layo.
So how are South Africans now reacting to this major sting? You said there have been complaints about how porous the border with Zimbabwe is. How are they reacting now that, the authorities are stepping up?
Well, I guess, Layo, it does put a level of confidence, as I've indicated, to the public to say that at least the Border Management Authority is essentially working. But B is that it continues to muddy the waters, the relationship between South Africa and Zimbabwe. As you would know, that there are issues that are happening right now. For example, issues around the killings of the Zimbabwean nationals that were killed in Dixlot. So it speaks to those challenges. In a way, it does really put the relationship in a very precarious position. But again, a lot of people have been excited about this particular development, particularly South Africans, giving it to the Border Management Authority, saying that good work, kudos to them. They must continue, these kinds of operation. As you know, that is vitally important, Layo. You cannot have an influx of people in a country that are undocumented. That is a challenge in many levels. Economic side, it becomes a burden to the fiscus because those people, have to benefit from the, if you like, the services that the government is been offering. For example, the issues around education, the issues around health. So it does put a burden. But if you know the number of people that are in the country, it's easy for the government to essentially budget well, prioritize funds for essential spending so that they can be able to take care of those people. But essentially, people are quite excited about this current development, Layo.
All right, then, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Innocent Samosa, our South Africa correspondent.
Thank you, colleague.
Well, just like Innocent had mentioned earlier, the Deep Slot community in South Africa is reeling with shock and fear after 7 young men were brutally set on fire in what appears to be a case of vigilantism. Well, on Friday night, a group of boys were pursued across the neighborhood by an armed group. The accusations against them suggest that they had been engaging in petty crimes that had instilled a sense of terror in the community. Well, tragically, the first 5 young men were apprehended and killed in Extension 12, while the remaining 2 met a similar fate in Extension 13. The South Africa Police Service say a preliminary investigation suggests that the victims were assaulted and burnt to death by a mob. However, the motive for the killing has not been confirmed at this point.
Police have opened cases of murder after 7 people were found burnt to death in 2 separate incidents in Diepsloot on Friday, the 1st of December 2023, and in the early hours of Saturday, the 2nd of December 2023. On Friday at approximately 11 o'clock in the evening, police received information about 2 bodies that were lying in the street in Diepsloot, extension 13. Upon arrival at the scene, police discovered the bodies of 2 males who were burnt. Both victims were certified dead on the scene. A few hours later, information was received about other 5 bodies that were lying in Diepsloot, extension 12. Police proceeded to the scene and found 5 bodies that were also burnt. They were also declared dead on the scene. Preliminary investigation suggests that in both incidents, the victims were assaulted and burnt by the mob. The motive for the killing cannot be confirmed at this stage. As the police in Gauteng, we strongly condemn acts of vigilantism and the community taking the law into their own hands, as that in itself constitutes a serious criminal offense. No arrests have been made yet, and police investigation is underway.
This thing is very, very bad because it's like, every day people are being killed, and then it's like today early in the morning we find that there are 5 people who have been killed here, and then it's like the forensic have come to do what they were doing. So right now we are not expecting, such things to happen again, and then it's like that's why we need a piece of, mind where we stay here in Diepsloot. So, this is extension 13. It happened yesterday, tonight. This is what happened. 5 people were being killed. They were being burned.
Well, over in Tanzania, at least 20 people have been killed by floods after heavy rain in the Manyara region in the north of the country. The Ministry of Health says the rains have also left a trail of destruction, ruining infrastructure like roads and submerging towns. Well, severe flooding caused by the El Nino weather phenomenon has killed hundreds of people in Kenya and Somalia in recent weeks. Well, Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan has now directed security agencies, the Ministry of Health, and other relevant bodies to focus on ongoing search and rescue efforts to prevent more deaths. Meanwhile, the humanitarian agency UNOCHA says the death toll from Somalia's ongoing floods has risen to 110, adding that more than 1 million people have been displaced and 2.4 million people impacted across 36 districts. The agency is also warning of a high risk of disease spread following reports of suspected cases of cholera and acute watery diarrhea in the states of Hishabelle and Galmudug. Well, only 30% of those impacted have received help. However, about 37 boats are said to have been deployed to deliver supplies or evacuate those that have been trapped by flood waters. Well, in recent weeks, Somalia, a neighbor in Kenya, and Ethiopia have all experienced the heaviest rains in more than 2 decades. Well, at the COP28 Climate Summit, Somalia's President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is urging developing nations at the summit to support nations struggling with the effects of climate change events. Just like we've mentioned, Somalia has been battered by relentless heavy rains that began in October, caused by the El Nino and Indian Ocean weather phenomena. Well, the intense rains have unleashed widespread flooding across the country, triggering displacement and also exacerbating an already existing humanitarian crisis caused by years of insurgency.
Talk about climate change as a future threat. However, Somalia as a country on the front line of the devastating effects of the extreme climate events, it is a reality we live with. As I stand here before you, my country is facing a humanitarian crisis which we are desperately trying to respond because of severe floods resulting from El Nino effect. These floods have so far affected more than 2.4 million people, displaced over 1.1 million, resulted in the loss of 120 human lives and thousands of livestock and 42,000 acres of crops washed away. This is as of yesterday, and the El Nino effect is still going on. I must note that today's victims of these devastating floods are sadly survivors of yesterday's droughts. Only a year ago, Somalia barely averted famine following consecutive failed rainy seasons. What's transpiring in my country today is not unique to us. For a country struggling with debt distress, unlimited access to finance, fighting terrorism, and responding to a humanitarian crisis at the same time is akin to impossibility. The case of Somalia is a clear demonstration of the intricate linkage between climate change, peace, and security.
Thanks for staying with us. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is also in attendance at the COP28 summit, has commended the new fund on loss and damage during his address in Dubai. However, President Ramaphosa added that in order to be efficient, more funds are needed. During his address, Mr. Ramaphosa also condemned what he called the cruel tragedy that is underway in Gaza, labeling it a war crime against the innocent people of Palestine and demanding it ends immediately. South Africa has backed the Palestinian cause for statehood in Israeli-occupied territories for decades, likening the plight of Palestinians to those of the black majority during the apartheid era in South Africa.
My pleasure to welcome his...
As South Africa, we applaud the landmark decision of COP28 to operationalize the new fund on loss and damage, and we also welcome the pledges that have already been made. If this fund is to effectively support those countries most vulnerable and that are affected by climate change, we need to mobilize more funding in a much greater scale. South Africa is appalled at the cruel tragedy that is underway in Gaza. The war against the innocent people of Palestine is a war crime that must be ended now.
Turning Africa into a green powerhouse is not just essential for the continent, it is also vital for global industrialization and decarbonization. Well, this is according to Kenya's President William Ruto, who made this known during his speech at the COP28 Climate Summit. After a year of record temperatures, the pressure is on for this year's summit to accelerate action to limit climate change. However, countries are divided over the future of fossil fuel, the burning of which is the main cause of climate change. Well, the summit, scheduled until December 12, achieved an early success by endorsing a new fund to assist economically disadvantaged nations.
We are here to affirm our commitment to provide robust support to those of us who have contributed least to climate change, yet bear its most catastrophic impacts. As Africa, we are ready to play our part in full. We cannot afford to neglect the immense potential or ignore the pressing needs of a continent on the cusp of transformative growth. Turning Africa into a green powerhouse is not just essential for the continent, it is also vital for global industrialization, decarbonization. Climate change does not respect artificial distinctions, traditional boundaries, or old antagonisms. Instead, it should unite us against a shared, borderless challenge. Consequently, Our approach must be collaborative, inclusive, and anchored in justice.
Away from the climate summit, a fourth candidate has dropped out of the presidential campaign in the Democratic Republic of Congo to support former governor and opposition candidate Moise Katumbi. Well, with the withdrawal of Deli Sesanga, who's a lawyer and member of parliament from Kasai Central Province, there are now 21 opposition candidates running for the top job in the country. Or they will be competing against the incumbent, President Felix Tshisekedi, who is vying for a second term in office. Mr. Sesanga's withdrawal is seen as boosting opposition unity after former Prime Minister Matata Ponyo and two other candidates, Seth Kinunu and Frank Diongo, earlier endorsed Mr. Katumbi. Campaigns for the election started 2 weeks ago and is expected to end by December 18. That's 2 days before the general elections on December 20. Well, rescue efforts are continuing in Zambia, as officials say they have been unable to locate dozens of illegal miners believed to be trapped after a mudslide at an open cast copper mine. Well, the accident in Zambia's northern Copper Belt province occurred after heavy rains. Rescue teams have been pumping water from the underground pits at the Selisi mine in Chingola, but have not been able to make contact with the miners. Or illegal mining is common in the country, which is seen as one of the world's largest copper producers. Tunisia says it has received and treated some of the wounded people coming from Gaza, where fighting between Hamas and Israeli Defense Forces resumed after a 7-day pause. The wounded Palestinians, along with 21 family members, boarded a Tunisian military plane and arrived at the international airport of Tunis on Sunday evening. Well, it comes as international concern deepens over mounting civilian deaths and injuries on the third day of fighting after the truce ended. With the resumption of hostilities and fighting in Gaza, hospitals in southern Gaza are still overflowing with dead and wounded people. Another plane carrying 150 wounded Palestinians is expected to arrive in Tunis on December 5. Well, despite strides in expanding access to insecticide-treated nets and medicines to help prevent malaria in young children and pregnant women, more people are getting sick with malaria. Well, this is according to a new report published by the World Health Organization. In 2022, there were an estimated 249 million malaria cases globally, exceeding the pre-pandemic level of 233 million in 2019 by 16 million cases. In addition to the disruptions caused by COVID-19, the global malaria response has also faced a growing number of threats.
The report shows that progress towards key global targets for reducing malaria cases, incidence, and death rates is off track by a wide margin. Given current trends, continuing with the status quo will only lead us further off track. We highlight a number of key actions in the report that are needed to get back on track. First, we need to step up financing. In 2022 alone, there was a global malaria funding gap of $3.7 billion. Second, we need robust political will. Countries must translate their political commitment to universal health coverage into tangible actions and resource that will save lives. Third, we need to use data strategically. Instead of deploying the same malaria control tools in all areas, intervention should be tailored to the local context to maximize impact. Next, we need to harness innovation and support the development of more effective, efficient, and affordable tools. Processes for bringing product to market need to be accelerated while maintaining safety, efficacy, and quality. And lastly, we need to take urgent action globally on climate change and health. Climate change poses one of the biggest threats to human health. Diseases such as malaria are sensitive to changes in temperature, humidity, and rainfall. As temperatures rise across the planet, some environments will become more favorable for mosquito breeding and survive, and some less favorable.
Finally, on the program, the antiquities authorities in Egypt have reopened the Imhotep Museum in the Saqqara necropolis after completing development work. According to officials, the museum is dedicated to Imhotep, the ancient Egyptian architect who built the Saqqara pyramid and houses one of the oldest royal mummies in Egypt.
And at the heart of this advancement in the sciences of engineering was an Egyptian builder called Imhotep. And this museum cherishes and presents the story of Imhotep to the world. And it also, on the side of the story of Imhotep, it tells the several stories of how this area of Saqqara continued to evolve over the 30 dynasties in terms of how the buildings were built, how the Egyptians were buried, and the interesting stories around all of them. All of the artifacts exhibited here are artifacts that were discovered by Egyptian and international missions, scientific missions.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olaride.